Hey everyone, welcome back to the Soundbyte. My name is Andrew, and today we're going to be doing a bit of a review, actually, first time here on the channel. Well, not a review first time, but like a review of an actual album. I'm not going to be doing a reaction today, but I have reacted to a couple of tracks from this band, Megadeth, which just released their last album ever. So, being a long-time Megadeth fan, I mean, I'm kind of going way back to like when Countdown to Extinction came out, so really, essentially. Back in the early 90s. I've been a fan of it for a long time, seen them a number of times, and been following them along the way with Dave Mustaine, and obviously a rotating sort of lineup over the years as well. I thought I'd sort of say a few words about the band and the album and my experience with the band as well, as far as my listening experience and some interactions with members of the band as well, previous members and current. And because this band has kind of really essentially meant a lot to me over the years, it's been a band that I think, a lot of people obviously are very aware of. Dave Mustaine kind of has built a humongous legacy with this band. Obviously he keeps getting referenced as being that sort of ex-member of Metallica, but I've never looked at him that way. In all honesty, it's a blip note in the sort of history of metal, and I've never even considered that's never entered my thought much, so I don't understand what the whole thing is with all that stuff. I just don't get it. Megadeth has always been a separate thing, and I've always loved Megadeth for their own unique style of thrash metal. Obviously with the big four, and I've said this numerous times that you can differentiate between the four bands, and for me, Megadeth was always the most technical of the four. They were the ones who kind of did some of the most craziest stuff on the guitar and the drums and things like that, and came up with some of the most memorable songs. A lot of people will credit, some of their earlier stuff, like Rust in Peace and stuff, as being the sort of legacy of the band. But I found a lot of good stuff in their later albums, Dystopia and 13 and albums like that, which I think are sort of underrated a little bit, But it's been a hit and miss, in all honesty. It's been a hit and miss with the band. Sometimes they kind of put out an album and it's like, oh, it's all right, But other times it's like, wow, this is fantastic, I want to hear more of this, So getting into the last album, the self-titled, the supposedly, allegedly final album, from Megadeth. And I say allegedly or supposedly because, we have been down this track with bands before where they kind of say they're going to retire and call it quits and stuff. And then a number of years later, they come back, So I guess never say never, I hope they come back again. But I guess Dave Mustaine has kind of, as mentioned, there are various reasons why he's decided to call it a day, which is understandable. None of these guys that have been around since the 80s are getting any younger, So there's only a certain point where they can only continue to do this kind of stuff. But I guess you can continue writing and recording music, though, well into your sort of older years. But I don't know. I don't know what the actual story is behind what Dave Mustaine will do now after this final album. But obviously he's going to be on the road hitting, every country in the world for the one last time, much like what Slayer did, So, but this getting into the album, I've obviously heard previously, before sitting down to listen to the entire thing from start to finish, the couple of the singles that they put out, Tipping Point being one of them. And Let There Be Shred. There was those songs that kind of gave you a bit of an idea of what the album is. And in all honesty, it did sort of represent the album fairly well, because there's a lot of that sort of old school thrash metal that Megadeth did on this album, which I think a lot of Megadeth fans loved. The word on the streets is that a lot of people are actually digging this album, and they actually think it's one of their best albums in years as well. I kind of will agree with that. I think that this album definitely represents a lot of what Megadeth have done, especially in the earlier years, but there's a lot of stuff in like the later years as well, So Tipping Point, obviously the opening track, is the quintessential Megadeth, I kind of feel. It's got a lot of that thrash stuff. It's a standard sort of Megadeth song, I guess you could say, but it's solid all the way through. It's a fantastic song. If you want to check out my reaction to that, I've dropped it down in the comments, so look at that. If you haven't even heard the song either, that's a good point to to check it out. But say a good starting point, and it represents the album very well and sets the tone for what you get to hear for the rest of the album. The second track, I Don't Care, it has a bit of a punky sort of vibe, and I definitely hear a lot of that kind of thing in the rest of the album as well, which is very interesting because there's a lot of that kind of punk thrash sort of like mentality in some of the earlier Megadeth stuff. So it sort of makes sense, I guess, that there would be a lot of that sort of sound, but it definitely feels like there's a bit of a throwback at the same time, you know, like it feels like Dave Mustaine was definitely sort of tipping the hat to where he sort of came from, you know. So, and I Don't Care kind of has a little bit of that, at least the punk side of what Megadeth's influences came from, you know. So it's a short but sweet song, but it's definitely a great little track to sort of like get into the next part of the album, you know. So Hey God is another track that's got the side of Megadeth that I always felt like I kind of leaned more towards sometimes, you know, because a lot of people kind of feel like the thrashier side, the faster stuff is the best stuff, and I will agree to a certain extent, but there's something about the groove stuff that they did, like on Countdown to Extinction and stuff, that I kind of feel represents some of the best sort of elements of Megadeth, you know. Hey God definitely has that Countdown to Extinction vibe about it, you know, that sort of mid-tempo, heavy chugging sort of riffs and stuff. It's a fantastic song, one of my favorites on the album so far, and I'd have to listen to the album a few more times to kind of really, you know, sort of figure out what my favorite tracks are, but that was one of the few that really stood out to me, you know. So that's one that I will definitely be repeating on my playlist, so to speak. Let There Be Shred was a song that I, like I said before, had already checked out. You can check out my reaction to that in the comments below as well. And that, again, like I Don't Care, has a bit of an old school punky thrash sort of vibe as well. Short but sweet. And the video definitely reflects that as well, you know. So I definitely feel there is again, like just a nod to like the old school sort of thrash and where Megadeth sort of came from, you know. So a great little track as well. Puppet Parade, much like Hey God, definitely reminds me of Countdown, but there's a little bit of a euthanasia sort of vibe when they started to get more melodic, I guess. And I definitely feel that's another great track and another side of the band that kind of really shows here on the album. Puppet Parade definitely, I kind of feel might be one of those growers, you know, that when you listen to it numerous times and kind of feel like, all right, this is actually one of my favorite tracks now, you know. So there's always one of those tracks that has, like I said, that grower sort of mentality, and yeah, that's one of the songs that I think will do that, you know. So, but it's early days yet, and I definitely have to kind of go back into the album and kind of re-listen to it over and over again. But initially, listen, Puppet Parade was definitely the ones that I kind of feel like I'll come back to again and again, you know. Another Bad Day is another great track. Mid-tempo, chugging riffs, melodic as well, you know. Again, that side of the band that sort of was sort of, you know, going a little bit away from their thrash sound. But again, that was sort of some of the stuff that I was really digging when they were doing that, you know. And it was really what kind of made me hang around as a fan, I guess you could say. Because a lot of the thrash stuff, at the end of the day, a lot of that kind of stuff can sometimes sound a little samey, even though Megadeth do get very creative with a lot of their guitar riffs and stuff, especially with Dave Mustaine solos. Yeah, I definitely feel like a track like Another Bad Day definitely represents that side of the band, and I kind of feel like in some ways it's a little bit underrated, you know. So it's a great track. Again, those chugging riffs, like, they do that so well, you know. Made to Kill has a lot of tempo switch ups. It's got kind of get that thrash stuff, and then sort of goes into a sort of more groove thing. Love that. The transitions was just seamless. It was a fantastic song. Another one that I kind of feel like might be one of my favorites. Again, I'll find out as time goes on, but that's definitely one of the highlights, and I kind of feel like a lot of people might agree with that one. Obey the Call is a thrash, from start to finish, Megadeth track. Like, it's like the Tipping Point track. It kind of is quintessential thrash, Megadeth style. And it's interesting how some of the songs, like, sort of as you go in deep into the album, it kind of doesn't really waver off too much, you know. Like, some albums kind of, like, you know, the second half sort of drops off a bit, you know. Here it sort of remains pretty consistent, you know, which is, I think, one of the failings of some of the albums that they have done in the past, where starts out really strong and kind of drops off a bit, and I kind of feel like the best albums that Megadeth have done over the years have been the ones that have been sort of consistently all the way through, just solid, from start to finish. And so far with this song here as well, sitting near the end, Obey the Call, I definitely feel like this album definitely has a more consistency going on, because this is a great track even towards the end of the album, so I Am War, again, going back to that sort of groove aspect of Megadeth, and the melodic sort of side of it. This is probably one of the more mellower songs, but I wouldn't call it a mellow song. But it's definitely one of the less heavy songs. So that's actually a good indication that this album is pretty on point as far as heavy and thrash, So this is exactly what Megadeth fans love to hear. And the fact that they've got not the weakest by any means, but certainly the softest song, I guess you could say, and it's not even a soft song at all. So it's fantastic, actually. Another great track, and again towards the end of the album, and it doesn't really sort of drop off at all. The Last Note is a very interesting song. I would say that the song itself has a sort of almost punky vibe again, like some of the other tracks. Again, those chugging riffs coming through, absolutely fantastic. Love that side of the band. But what's really interesting is the final words towards the end, when Dave Mustaine sort of has a bit of a spoken sort of word section. And now I disappear, he leaves us with his final words. And it's a sort of bittersweet moment, and I guess to longtime Megadeth fans, including myself, could be considered an emotional point, and understandable that this would be the last track on the album, as far as like Megadeth stuff anyway. It's a perfect way to end the album, really. And it's him saying goodbye, Dave Mustaine saying goodbye to the fans over over 40 years or whatever it is it's been, so a very emotional point in the album, but a very fitting point as well. And it sort of makes you reflect on not only just the entire album that you just listened to at that point, but also kind of everything that you've heard from Megadeth over the years, so it's certainly a one that stood out on the album for sure, for various reasons, Of course, the biggest one that I think a lot of people were looking at because of the connection to Metallica was the cover of Ride the Lightning, which is obviously something that Dave Mustaine had a hand in writing the song way back in the day. And obviously a quite famous Metallica track, the title track from their second album. And I found it really, really interesting that Dave Mustaine would actually record and release this on the album, considering that there's obviously all these sort of like, controversies and stuff and surrounding Megadeth and Metallica. I thought for sure that he would just stay away from all that stuff. And yet here we are with a track called Ride the Lightning, which, like I said, he had a hand in writing these songs. He came up with a lot of the guitar stuff on there. I don't know. It's, before getting into the recording itself and the song itself, I just found it very interesting that he would include it on here. It really took me by surprise. I never expected it. Didn't think he would ever do that. And I know he's sort of gone on record and explained why he did it. I don't know. I guess he has his own reasoning, I guess. But I was sort of up in arms about it. Like, I wasn't sure what to think of that, I was just really surprised. But getting into the track, it's fantastic. Like, his version of the song, or as far as, like, he pretty much, if you line it up to the actual original, it's pretty close to the original. I guess there are certain couple of little things that he kind of changed a little bit, but for the most part, it's pretty much sounds like Ride the Lightning, What I found the most interesting was the fact that he was obviously singing James Hetfield's lyrics, so it's just a weird sort of like moment to sort of like see, or hear. It's one thing for him to cover, like, tracks, from Metallica, musically speaking and stuff, like, it's just, I don't know, it was just an interesting moment, but to hear him sort of sing Hetfield's lyrics was cool, though. It was cool to see, and I think that kind of really blows the hatchet as far as all that stuff is concerned. The fact that he's, covering a song like this. Either way, it's a fantastic version of the song. Some people would say it's better than the original. I'm not a huge fan, and this is very controversial to say, I'm not a huge fan of Ride the Lightning, the album. I think the production's kind of, a little iffy. So in terms of that side of it, this version is actually better. But I will say that the live version that Metallica do is definitely better, and it sounds like, their song. It sounds like Metallica, so... But it's interesting when you hear the solos and all that kind of stuff and certain aspects of the track, when you hear this version on the album, you definitely get a bit of that Megadeth feel for sure. There's a little bit of that Dave Mustaine signature in there, obviously, which makes sense, because he had a hand in the writing of it. But it's interesting how there's that sort of like a little bit of Megadeth. I mean, if you know where to look, I guess, because he does have our signature sound and people know that sound very well, so... but it's an interesting way to end the album, though, and it's what a hell of a way to go out. Will he play that track live? I don't know. I don't know if he's been asked about that. I'm sure he has. Maybe he will at some point. I don't know. What would be really interesting is what the very last song he will play live, and it's got to be some quintessential Megadeth song, I guess you could say, but. I remember when Slayer did the final tour, and I saw them on their last run, and I remember seeing Tom Araya sort of standing out to the crowd and just sort of not really saying anything, just sort of looking out. And he was out there for about, I don't know, it felt like 5-10 minutes or something like that, I think, and just didn't say a word and just sort of looked at the crowd and then sort of walked off stage, and I kind of feel like, that emotional moment will definitely be seen here with Megadeth. More so than Slayer, I don't know, because obviously Megadeth have had a very interesting sort of career, and Dave Mustaine in particular, has had a very interesting career with Megadeth, and very interesting controversial character. Although it doesn't have to be that way, I guess, depending on how your perspective is. I remember interviewing him once. Many years ago, and it was around the time that they were doing a Countdown to Extinction anniversary, I think it was, and so we ended up talking a bit about that and how it was sort of it was their biggest album at the time, and they almost got number one. And it was what was it? It was the guy that did that Achy Breaky Heart song. I forget the name of the guy now. He ended up kicking them off the number one spot, or taking that spot over them, I should say. And so he referenced that, and I thought that was pretty funny because I remember that song, and it was one of those kind of, one-hit wonders sort of tracks, and it's like, to kick off Megadeth like that, like Megadeth is way better, but it is what it is. But we had a bit of a laugh over that, but he was, in the conversation that we had, he was Dave Mustaine, you could tell. There's no second thoughts about that stuff. He is who he is, and he doesn't sort of like beat around the bush and kind of pretend to be anything but himself. So there's something to be said about that. The honesty about that whole thing is fantastic. He says what he says and he does what he does, and he's a legend for that reason. So the other guys on the album here are Teemu, obviously on the guitars here, his first time on the Megadeth, and obviously probably last, I guess. So the guitar solos that he did on there were fantastic. He's a tremendous guitar player as well, and I'm looking forward to seeing them live as well. So James Lomenzo had been in the band before a number of years ago. I forget which album he was last on, but so this is not his first time, but he did what he did on this album, obviously with Dave Ellefson being the sort of the main bass player back in the day, and another person that I had interviewed a couple of times. Super nice guy, really a shame about what all that stuff happened, when they went down a few years ago, but I interviewed him both before that and after that stuff, and it's just a bad luck kind of thing, I guess, and to some degree. It is what it is. But like I said, Megadeth have had a lot of those sort of controversies over the years, so I guess it wasn't that surprising. But super nice guy, though, super nice guy. And it's just a shame that he wasn't on this final album, The two Daves has always been a bit of a thing with the fans, and yeah, it's a shame that it sort of went down that way, you know. But Dirk Verbeuren on the drums, who obviously was in solo work previously before he joined the band a number of years ago. A fantastic drummer, did a fantastic job. The double kicks on this album was fantastic. The sound was incredible as well. Whoever did the production on this, kudos, because it's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, Dirk absolutely killed it again, and I'm looking forward to seeing him on the drums again. I also interviewed him as well, once or twice in the past. Super nice guy. Met him briefly as well. As with Dave Ellefson, actually, I met him briefly a couple of times. When he came over and did some guitar clinic stuff, I think it was. And yeah, again, yeah, just super nice guys, you know. And just a yeah, the legacy of Megadeth is one that I think people will remember for a long time to come, you know. Definitely one of the greatest, not just thrash bands, but greatest metal bands of all time, you know. And it's just a, you know, it's a bit of a sad thing that they're calling it a day. But what a way to go out, though. This final album, this self-titled Megadeth album, is definitely one of the best albums I've done in a number of years, you know. It's certainly since 13, I reckon, is probably the best album. But I guess if you're going to go before that, yeah, The World Needs a Hero, I guess, or Euthanasia, you know. Those albums always stand out, and I think this one will definitely stand out. So fantastic album. If I had to give it a sort of rating, I think, you know, maybe an 8 out of 10, I guess, or maybe even a 9. You know, fantastic as always. It is what you would expect from Megadeth. If you were expecting or have any expectations of what this album should sound like, this would be it. I don't think that they could have done any better, considering that, you know, what they have, you know, on the table, you know, as far as like where they are in their career and who's in the band and all that kind of stuff, you know. So I think that the writing, the recording, the production, everything about it is fantastic. And yeah, definitely going to be diving back into the album numerous times and seeing which one's going to come out as being some of my favorites, you know. So anyway, let me know what you think if you have heard the album. Let me know if your stories behind, you know, if you've met any of the band members or at all, or if you've had any interactions with Megadeth over the years, your experiences with them, seeing them live and stuff, what your favorite album is. And also, if there's any Megadeth tracks from the past that you want me to react to, let me know. Obviously familiar with everything that they've done, you know, but I'm sure that there's some live videos or whatever that I haven't seen. So maybe some cool music videos that I might have missed along the way as well, which I'm pretty sure that I have missed a few, you know. So let me know and I'll definitely check it out. But there you go. There's my review of the final Megadeth album. Thank you for tuning in as always, and I will see you in the next video.